Macbeth, what if he were a middle manager obsessed with promotion? Chapter 1. The Three Evaluators. Elsinore Trading, 2nd Sales Division. In this company, no position was stranger than that of section chief. From above came the order to keep the floor running. From below came the plea to go take it up with the higher-ups. He bore both expectations on his shoulders, carried both burdens alone, and the credit for both, more often than not, ended up belonging to someone else entirely. The section chief was the one point on the org chart where the most arrows landed, and through which the most arrows passed straight on by. Macbeth was that section chief. 15 years with the company. His sales figures had always ranked near the top of the division. He worked hard. He worked too hard. He stayed late into the night, kept his phone on through every weekend, cleaned up after his subordinates, and absorbed the unreasonable demands of his superiors. He was capable, and he had not yet realized that being capable was, in this company, the most thankless trait a man could have. Work piles onto the capable. And onto those who attract work, still more work piles. Not reward, but work alone came rolling toward him, gathering like a snowball. That day, he was on his way back from an in-house award ceremony. The president's award, given to whoever posted the highest figures for the quarter. He had received it. On the stage, he had shaken the president's hand, had his picture taken, basked in the applause. The certificate read, "In recognition of outstanding sales performance, this award is hereby presented." It came in a fine frame. The frame, in all likelihood, was worth considerably more than the cash prize inside. In fact, the prize money came to roughly the same amount as the tab he had picked up the month before, at a welcome party for a new subordinate. In the elevator, he found himself together with his colleague Banquo. Banquo was a section chief too. Same intake year, equally capable, working just as hard. For a long time the two had acknowledged one another, watched one another with just a touch of wariness, and run side by side. Too friendly to be called rivals, too conscious of each other's evaluations to be called friends. In this company, that is what colleagues from the same intake became. You take the pace of the man running beside you and make it the yardstick for your own. "Congratulations," Banquo said. He meant it. And behind those heartfelt words, just a trace of something he could not quite wipe from his heart remained. Both of them had grown skilled at hiding that trace. "Thanks, you'll be next," Macbeth replied. This too was half sincere and half said because saying it was the courteous thing to do. Off the elevator, the two of them headed for a briefing scheduled for that evening. A briefing on the revision of the personnel evaluation system. In this company, every few years, the personnel system was revised. Revision, more often than not, meant the criteria for evaluation were nudged just slightly in a direction the employees could not see. The less visible the criteria, the more the employees took to reading the faces of those above them. That was the true purpose of revision, and the sharp ones, without saying it aloud, had noticed. At the front of the briefing room, 3 personnel evaluators sat lined up. A specialized team that operated the new evaluation system. Within the company, no one knew quite who had started it, but everyone called them the same thing, the 3 appraisers. They held the evaluation of every single employee in their hands, deciding promotions and demotions with numbers and comments. What they had before them was nothing more than a single sheet of Excel, and yet a single line on that sheet decided the next year of a person's life. After the briefing ended, one of those 3 stopped Macbeth and Banquo in the corridor. His tone was that of small talk, but in this company, when someone from personnel made small talk, it was never small talk. Every word was a measurement of something. "Mr. Macbeth," the evaluator said, "you'll be made a division head before long." Macbeth laughed. He took it for flattery. Surely not, the head's chair is still occupied. "Yes," the evaluator said, his expression unchanging. "It's occupied now. Then he looked toward Banquo and added this. "Mr. Banquo, you yourself will not become a division head, but your subordinates, the people you've trained, will one day lead this division. You'll be the one who raises the men who rise." Both of them laughed it off on the spot. They took it for a joke from personnel, a clever bit of flattery. But that night, Macbeth could not sleep. The evaluator's words would not leave his head. "You'll be made a division head before long. It's occupied now. Now." What did now mean? Occupied now, but in time it would open up. Was someone going to quit, or was someone going to be made to quit? And into that empty chair, he was the one who would sit. He stared at the ceiling. It was a strange thing. Until then he had never, not clearly, thought he wanted to be a division head. No, it was not that he had never thought it. Everyone aims upward. But it had been no more than a vague someday when his turn came around naturally. If the wind blows, the fruit will fall in time. A wish that passive. And yet, the moment "you'll become a division head before long" was put into words by another's mouth, that passive wish changed shape. A vague someday became a soon with a definite outline. And a wish with an outline suddenly began to take on weight. What he did not have began to feel as though it were already his, and the fact that he did not yet have it suddenly began to feel like an unbearable void. A man does not suffer so long as he has, from the start, given up on what he does not have. The suffering begins the moment someone whispers to him, "It could be yours." Possibility approaches wearing the face of hope, but its true nature, more often than not, is to open in the heart of a man who had been at peace, a single new hole that goes by the name of lack. Beside him, his wife turned over in bed. She was still awake. She had long since noticed he could not sleep. She could pick out, from the breathing of the partner she had spent so many years with, the rhythm of a sleepless night. "What's wrong?" she said into the darkness. Macbeth hesitated, but in the end he told her. The evaluator's words in the corridor. He remembered them word for word. He had memorized them against his will. His wife was silent for a while. Then in the dark, quietly, she said this. "You think that was just flattery?" "It wasn't." "Personnel," she said. "Do you really think they'd stop 2 section chiefs in the corridor for no reason and tell only one of them he'll become a division head? Those people understand the concept of cost in their words. They don't say things that mean nothing. Those words, there's surely more to come after them." In the dark, Macbeth's eyes went wide. His wife's words let fall a single drop of oil onto the small flame that had been flickering inside him. It was something he himself, somewhere in his heart, had already been thinking. He simply had not yet had the courage to put it into words on his own, and his wife had put it into words for him, in his place. A man hesitates to admit in his own voice what he desires, but when someone he trusts speaks it for him, that desire suddenly comes to seem legitimate. An ambition held alone is mere greed, but an ambition shared between two was already a plan. That night, Macbeth did not sleep a wink in the end. The whole time he was picturing a single scene, another certificate in a fine frame, in recognition of outstanding division management, and beside it his own name, Division Head Macbeth. He had done nothing yet, hurt no one, committed no crime. But the place where a man first missteps is, more often than not, within this long, sleepless night that comes before any action. His hands were still clean. With his hands still clean, only his heart had already begun to walk, far ahead, toward a dark place. Outside the window, the sky began to pale. Morning would come again, the morning that always comes, though no one calls for it. But that morning, what awaited Macbeth was not the usual morning. What awaited him as he came into work was a single internal email. The sender was the personnel department. The subject line read, "Notice regarding the future structure of the division head position." His finger on the mouse stopped for just an instant. Even before he clicked, he knew that those sleepless hours of last night were, from here, about to set something into motion. Chapter 2: The Empty Chair. Regarding the future structure of the division head position. The body of the email was short. The current division head would, at the end of this term, be seconded to an affiliated company. His successor, undecided, notice to follow once determined. That was all. Macbeth read those 3 lines over and over. Undecided. The successor was undecided. In this company, no word made a man more uneasy than undecided. That it was not decided meant it was about to be decided. The period before it was decided lay open, equally, to everyone. And around a seat that lay open equally, men could no longer remain equal. The current head's secondment was sudden, but thinking it over there had been signs. For the past half-year he had all but stopped speaking up in meetings. The favor of the upper ranks was not what it had once been. In this company, from the men who lose their power, the place where they sit is quietly changed. Secondment was the gentlest possible euphemism for it. No one had been killed. The chair had simply been moved a little further off. From that day, the air in the second sales division changed. No one said it aloud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. Who is the next division head? 2 strong candidates, Macbeth and Banquo, same intake, same figures, having worked exactly as hard as one another. The 2 lines that had run side by side until now had, at this point, come to a narrow path where only one of them could go on. Macbeth could feel himself changing. Until now he had trusted Banquo. When troubled, he had consulted him. They had shared the credit. But now, inside him, Banquo was little by little becoming a different presence. Not a comrade, but an obstacle. Not a friend running beside him, but the one man standing between himself and the chair, a mere nuisance. Nothing had changed. Banquo was the same Banquo as yesterday. What had changed was only the way Macbeth saw him. One chair opens up, and a man who had been a friend begins to look like an enemy. The chair had that kind of power. The chair itself was nothing but a lump of wood and cloth. That night, too, he told his wife. She heard him out to the end, then said quietly, "You think it'll be decided if you wait." "What do you mean?" "Undecided," she said, "means the ones above are still wavering. That they're wavering means there's no deciding factor yet. A scale with no deciding factor tips easily with the smallest of weights." "A weight, you mean?" His wife did not answer. She only looked at him. That look was the answer. Macbeth again could not sleep that night. He understood. What the weight his wife spoke of pointed to. It meant moving himself, not waiting but tipping, setting something onto the scale with his own hand. What concretely he should do he still did not know, but the direction alone had been settled. Once the direction is settled, a man becomes able to find, in any quantity, reasons convenient to that direction. He was more fit for the division than Banquo. He could protect his subordinates better. He could make this division better. All of it was true. By lining up only the things that were true, a man carries himself toward the conclusion most convenient of all. A few days later, the opportunity came to him, from the other side. The current head, as part of his handover before the secondment, asked both Macbeth and Banquo to prepare a certain document. The business plan for the coming term. Who would compile it and how? That, in all likelihood, would be the final material the upper ranks looked at. The 2 of them understood it. 2 candidates given the same assignment. This was no longer a mere handover. It was the final selection. Banquo, as ever, went at it head-on. He gathered data, listened to the voices on the floor, and built up, steadily, a solid plan. He was that kind of man. He did not take shortcuts. Macbeth made a plan too, but he did one other thing besides. He sounded out indirectly how Banquo was proceeding, what data Banquo was using, where he was putting his effort. And on that basis, he assembled his own plan to look just slightly, ever so slightly, better than Banquo's. Not to win head-on on the same ground. To see the cards in his opponent's hand and then step out just half a pace ahead. It was not dishonest. He had deceived no one. He had merely observed his opponent well. That was what he told himself. This is strategy. It isn't cowardly. Gathering information is the basis of business. If anything, Banquo, who doesn't do it, is the naive one. One after another, he attached plausible names to what he was doing. Once you've attached a name, most acts come to look like legitimate work. That was the other technique the company taught its employees, free of charge and thoroughly. The technique of attaching a business name to the things that trouble your conscience. The handover document was due that Friday. Macbeth submitted his plan, the one trimmed to look just half a pace better than Banquo's. His hands were still clean. He had hurt no one. He had merely submitted a single document. But that Friday night, for the first time, he clearly recognized it. He was no longer on the side that waits. He had gone over to the side that tips. He had set the first weight onto the scale with his own hand. However small that weight, once set down, it could no longer be lifted off. Before going home, he stayed behind alone in the office. In the empty floor, he gazed at the division head's chair, which belonged to no one yet. The chair the departing head had half cleared out. The drawers were half empty. The chair faced this way, waiting for someone to sit in it. That chair was just a chair, a leather chair a little finer than the rest. But to Macbeth, it no longer looked like just a chair. He understood that to sit in that chair, he would, from here, do something that would not stop at half a pace. The man who has taken the first half step does not hesitate at the second. The hesitation is always only at the first step. Once you have taken the first step, the road ahead is a slope. From there, by the weight of your own feet alone, you go tumbling down on your own. The office lights automatically half went out. It was a cost-cutting setting. In this company, as the night wore on, the lights on the empty floors were thinned out automatically. In the half-darkened room, only the empty chair floated up dimly into view. Macbeth gazed at that chair for a long, long time. Chapter 3: The First Step. There were 2 weeks until the result of the final selection came out. For Macbeth, those 2 weeks were longer than the 15 years that had come before. Every morning he checked the email from personnel first of all. Finding nothing had come, he felt relief, and at the same time, disappointment. The undecided time brings equal measures of hope and anxiety. Until the day it was decided, his heart shuttled every day back and forth between those two. One afternoon, he came to know something. In the business plan Banquo had submitted, there was a single error in one of the numbers, not a large error. Into the projection for next term's expected sales, old data had been mixed in. Hardly anyone would notice, but if the upper ranks did notice, Banquo's evaluation would surely fall. He would be judged as lacking in precision. And in this company, an evaluation of lacking in precision was something that could prove fatal. Macbeth came to know it by chance. And he realized a certain fact, that he now held 2 choices. One was to tell Banquo, as a colleague from the same intake as he always had, "Hey, this number here is out of date." There was still time to fix it. The other was to keep silent, to do nothing, just to close his mouth and quietly hope the other man did not notice his own error. Is doing nothing a sin? He put the question to himself. He would not be lifting a hand, nor telling a lie. He would merely not say what he knew. Silence is not an action. Silence ought to be the same as doing nothing. He tried to think so, and could not think it through. He knew. The old self would have told Banquo without hesitation. That was the natural thing. The very fact that he now hesitated to do it was already proof that he was no longer the man he had been. The reason doing nothing felt this heavy was that, in truth, it was not doing nothing, and he himself knew that best of all. That night he told his wife about Banquo's error. His wife was silent a while, then said this: "You're not the one who made that number, are you?" "No, Banquo made the mistake himself." Then his wife said, "You've done nothing." It was the word he had most wanted to hear, and at the same time, the word he had most not wanted to hear. His wife had granted his silence a pardon, but the moment he accepted that pardon, he realized it. That needing a pardon was, after all, immovable proof that it was a something which ought to be pardoned. If he had truly done nothing, no pardon should have been needed at all. Macbeth decided to keep silent. Decided, or rather went on choosing to do nothing. One day, then another. Each time he met Banquo, he swallowed the words that rose to his throat. He would start to say, "Hey, that number," and stop. And each time he stopped, it grew a little easier. Words swallowed once were, the second time, swallowed more easily still. The result came out the Monday 2 weeks later. The email from personnel. Macbeth's name was on it. Second Sales Division, next division head. He had won. When he read the email, he felt, to his own surprise, nothing at all. No joy, no sense of accomplishment welled up. Though he had gained the thing he had wanted so badly, what was in his chest was only a chill, a quiet coldness. He knew the reason for it. He had not won by his own strength. To be precise, he had not won by his own strength alone. He had merely looked away from the place where Banquo had stumbled and walked on past beside it. Sitting in the victor's chair, he knew that this chair was, in half, something he had gained by keeping silent. A little later, another email made the rounds. A company-wide notice of personnel changes. On it, too, was Banquo's name. Transfer to a subsidiary. Not a secondment, but a transfer. From secondment, one can someday return. From transfer, one cannot. Banquo had been sent to the side from which there is no return. Whether that single out-of-date number had been the deciding factor, Macbeth had no way to confirm. But there was no need to confirm it either. To confirm it would be to learn whether his own silence had had a part in it. He chose to remain not knowing, the oldest rule for surviving in this company. The one who knows nothing survives the longest. That evening, Banquo came to Macbeth's desk to pay his respects. "Congratulations," Banquo said, the same word he had said that day in the elevator. But this time, there was nothing hidden behind it. He was no longer a man to compete against. The face of a man who has stepped down from the contest was, strangely, at peace. "You'll make a good division head," Banquo said. "Look after the team." Macbeth tried to say something, but the words would not come. The moment he was told congratulations, the words he had gone on swallowing all this time caught hard in the back of his throat. Should he, even now, mention that number? No, it was too late. The result was out. To say it now would turn everything into a mere farce. In the end, he said this: "Thanks, take care of yourself." Even to him, it was a hollow phrase. The meaningless greeting everyone offers the one being sent off. Banquo gave a light nod and left. Macbeth watched his back go. The back that had run beside him for so long. In the moment it first turned into a back receding into the distance. That night, Macbeth sat in the division head's chair for the first time. A leather chair, a little finer than the rest. It was not bad to sit in, but it was not as good as he had thought either. The chair was just a chair. The thing he had wanted so badly was, once he had it, nothing but a lump of wood and cloth and leather. Only while you want it does it look as though it shines. The instant you have it, the shine goes out. From the new desk, he looked over the floor. A few of his subordinates were still there, working. They watched the new division head with eyes that were a little wary, a little hopeful. Taking in those gazes, Macbeth thought suddenly, "Will a night come for someone among these when they gaze at this chair of mine, the way I am doing now?" The fluorescent lights overhead were half lit, for the sake of cost-cutting. Come to think of it, he thought. In the scene he had pictured that sleepless night, there had been only the certificate and his own name. Banquo's back had not been there. That beside the thing you gain, there always stands the thing you have lost that the self of that night had not yet known. His hands were still clean. He gazed at his own 2 hands on top of the desk. Not a speck of dirt on them, not a single drop of blood, but he knew that with hands still clean, a man had already finished taking his first step. From here, the second step was coming. The second step, to protect that chair. Chapter 4, to protect. The first few weeks after becoming division head passed more quietly than he had expected. looking over the handover documents, sitting in the new chair, listening to the reports of his subordinates. Just that much was oddly tiring. Macbeth felt he understood, a little, why the former head had always gazed out the window come the afternoon. He had not been resting. He had been enduring the hours of being watched. The division head's chair was a place to sit, and at the same time a place to be seen. Each time he spoke up in a meeting, he could tell his words were taken more heavily than before. The same content that had been let slide when he was a section chief was now argued, examined, recorded. Authority, Macbeth learned, was others coming to demand that he answer for his own words. He had not become free, he had merely come to be watched. And there was one more thing that had changed. Banquo was no longer there. A transfer to a subsidiary. Not a secondment, but a transfer. Not even a month had passed since the day that notice made its rounds, and yet his desk had long since been cleared, and a different temp worker sat there now. From the floor, Banquo's presence had vanished astonishingly fast. So this is what it is for a person to be gone, Macbeth thought. Give it a week and no one speaks the name anymore. And yet from inside Macbeth alone, Banquo would not vanish. Precisely because he was gone, there was no way to confirm. Had they been on the same floor, he could have read the man's face and set himself at ease. But Banquo was now in a place beyond reach, and there was no way to know what he was thinking, with what face he passed his days. What Macbeth feared was not Banquo's existence, but that Banquo, somewhere at his transfer posting, would quietly come to notice something. That error in the number, he had known and kept silent. Banquo surely still did not notice it, but time is a troublesome thing. A man driven into a backwater post, his work reduced, his hours emptied, eventually looks back on the past. He chews over again and again why he lost. And one day he may suddenly recall the documents from back then and arrive at his own mistake. And he may think further still. That Macbeth, who had been in the same division, could not possibly have failed to notice it. The silence had not been kindness, but a transaction. Imagining the day Banquo would come to realize this, Macbeth felt the pit of his stomach go cold. The one who has left cannot argue back, but he can accuse, and from a distance, with nothing to lose by it. Watching his manner, his wife said, "You've won, so now you're on the side that protects. The one who attacks has nothing to lose, but the one who protects carries within him the possibility of losing everything. That is why the one who protects becomes more timid than the one who attacks. It is not weakness, but the correct response of the one who has." The words seemed like comfort, and yet were not the slightest comfort at all. One day Macbeth had a subordinate organize 3 years' worth of business reports. The ostensible purpose was to confirm the handover, but the true aim was elsewhere. He wanted to check whether that number remained anywhere among the documents Banquo had submitted. Banquo himself was gone, but his traces remained within the company. If that number lay somewhere among the documents, someone would one day find it. The one who found it would doubt the selection of back then, and arrive at the possibility that Macbeth had known and kept silent. You can keep a person at a distance, but you cannot keep at a distance the paper a person leaves behind. The reports were vast, and he turned their pages alone into the late night. Following the old numbers under the fluorescent light, Macbeth suddenly realized it. He was not trying to erase the crime. He was trying to erase the possibility of the crime being found. The crime itself could not be erased. He already knew that. What can be erased is only its discovery, and so a man fears discovery more than the crime. And the man who fears discovery begins a new action. The first silence had been settled with a single lie, but to protect that lie, the next lie became necessary. Macbeth had thought he had set a single weight onto the scale, but in fact, he had begun to understand that he was already crossing a bridge from which there was no climbing back. Sending Banquo far away had not been an ending but a beginning. That night, he ran part of the documents through the shredder. The sound of paper being cut was louder than he had thought and rang long across the empty floor. He did not stop his hands. telling himself this was not the destruction of evidence but organizing. But he was also aware that the excuse no longer worked as well as it once had. He glanced, suddenly, toward Banquo's empty desk. Someone else sat there, and yet for an instant he thought he saw the outline of its former owner. The one who should not be there is the one most on your mind. Macbeth looked away and fed the next sheet into the shredder. On his way out, seeing his own face reflected in the elevator mirror, Macbeth was a little startled. What was there was not the face of a man who had risen, but the face of a man being chased by something, though the thing chasing him should no longer be at this company at all. Chapter 5. The People Who Get Drawn In. So long as he bore the crime alone, it was still all right. The problem was that organizing the documents could not be finished by one person. 3 years of reports were too many, and for Macbeth to check everyone with his own hands was physically impossible. Turning a few pages at a time in the dead of night could not keep up. In time he had no choice but to use a subordinate, and from there, the matter ceased to be his alone. The first one drawn in was a young subordinate. In his 3rd year with the company, the man, at Macbeth's request, was digitizing the old documents. Simple work, scanning the old paper one sheet after another and organizing it into folders. But for Macbeth it was not simple. He instructed that subordinate, for one particular case in one particular year alone, dispose of the originals and don't upload the data to the shared external folder either. He did not explain the reason. The subordinate did not ask the reason. Because not asking, he too had learned, was a working adult skill. Did the subordinate find it suspicious? He probably did, but between thinking a thing and saying it aloud there is a deep ditch, and most people do not cross that ditch. To cross it is to become a troublesome person yourself. The one who makes waves is not well evaluated. So the subordinate silently followed the instruction, and in that moment he too became an accomplice, without knowing it himself. Macbeth was aware that he had not divided the crime but distributed it. To draw others in is not to make the crime lighter. If anything, it is to make it heavier. One person's secret vanishes when the one person dies, but 2 people's secret can only be kept if both go on keeping silent. Macbeth, thinking he had laid nothing on the subordinate's shoulders, had in fact buried a quiet bomb in that young man's future. One day when someone asked for that year's documents, the one who had carried out the disposal was the subordinate, and at that moment, the subordinate would understand for the first time what he had been made to do. But by the time he understood, it would already be too late. The next one drawn in was an old acquaintance in accounting. Over drinks, Macbeth asked the man casually about the circumstances of Banquo's transfer. What he really wanted to know was something else. How far back the records of that selection remained, who could view them. Carried by the drink, the man told as a laughing matter of how slipshod the company's records management was. Old selection documents were automatically discarded after 3 years. No one looks at them. There is no one even to look. Those words should have set Macbeth at ease. But he was not set at ease. If anything, he gained a new anxiety. That they were discarded after 3 years meant, put the other way, that for 2 more years and more they remained somewhere. And that night he regretted having let Banquo's name slip to his accounting acquaintance. Why had he brought up that name? Someone might later testify like this. Division head Macbeth was awfully concerned about the matter of Mr. Banquo. The one drawn in becomes, just like that, a witness. Macbeth was beginning to understand that his actions to protect were, each time, giving birth to new things that had to be protected. Ask a subordinate to dispose of something, and you must mind that subordinate's mouth. Probe accounting, and you must mind accounting's memory. To protect one lie, he had to silence 10 people, and each time he silenced 10, an 11th appeared. This was work that did not end. Late one night, he was alone with that young subordinate in a meeting room. It was to check on the progress of organizing the documents. The subordinate reported flatly, "Everything from the years you instructed has been disposed of and the data organized." Macbeth thanked him and added, "Keep this matter to yourself." The subordinate gave a short nod, with a face that said, "I understand." Macbeth could not look at that face for long. That he understood meant this young man already grasped, in half, the meaning of what he had been made to do. He was following while understanding, which meant this subordinate too was trying to gain something, Macbeth's trust, a debt owed by a superior. He had thought he was drawing the subordinate in, but he realized the subordinate too had begun to make use of him. That was what distributing the crime meant. The one you distribute it to grips it and pulls it toward himself. Macbeth had thought he was buying the subordinate's silence, but in fact he had sold the subordinate his own weakness. From here on, before this young man, he could never come on strong. At evaluation time, at appraisal time, somewhere in his head, there would be that meeting room of that night. When he left the meeting room, the corridor was dark, and there was no one on the floor. Macbeth glanced, suddenly, at the desk where Banquo had once sat. The temp who sat there had already gone home, and only the chair remained in the dark. An empty seat. A seat where no one should be. And yet Macbeth felt as though he were being watched from that chair and quickened his pace. The one who has left can accuse. The one you have silenced will one day open his mouth. The more there is to protect, the more there is that cannot be protected. Macbeth was little by little coming to understand that the place he had climbed up to was not a summit, but the edge of a cliff. Chapter 6: What Comes Back. It began with a single email. The sender was Banquo. From the man he had not heard from once in the half-year and more since the transfer to the subsidiary, an email arrived abruptly one morning. The subject line was curt. A consultation. The body, too, was short. "There's something I'd like to confirm about the selection documents from back then. I have business at headquarters soon. Could you spare me a little time?" That was all the message said. But Macbeth read those few lines over and over. Something to confirm. The selection documents from back then. What had Banquo noticed? Or had he noticed nothing yet, and was this truly just a clerical confirmation? The message was calm, with not a trace of threat to it. Precisely because there was no threat, it was frightening. An angry man can be predicted, but a man whose thoughts you cannot read cannot be predicted. The one who has left cannot return, so he had thought. A transfer, unlike a secondment, is the road from which there is no return. Macbeth himself had confirmed that and set himself at ease, and yet Banquo was coming back, physically, to headquarters, and what he was bringing with him was the past. From that day, something inside Macbeth began to crumble. In meetings, the voices of his subordinates sounded far away. The letters on documents would not enter his eyes. His sleep was shallow and he woke before dawn. Each time he recalled the words of that email, something to confirm. What? He started and erased a reply many times over. Meet quickly and he would be suspected. Not meet and he would be suspected all the more. Whichever he chose, it did not look like the right answer. At home, too, he changed. His wife was the first to notice. She was the one who had once told him, "You become the weight on the scale." A colleague in the same division, an accomplice who had urged on his ambition. And now she watched in silence as her husband rose in the night. At one point she said, "You've done nothing. Silence is not a sin. You only pretended not to notice." But the very hands with which she spoke those words had, at some point, come to be washed frequently. She laughed that she was overthinking it, just a habit, but Macbeth was watching. His wife washing her hands many times a day and each time running the water for a long while. She too had begun to crumble. The wife who had thought she was supporting him had in fact understood the crime more deeply than he had. The one who urges on bears the same weight as the one who lifts the hand. She had learned this late. The two of them looked the other way at each other's crumbling. That was the last kindness of the thing called marriage. The day before Banquo was to come to headquarters, Macbeth was in the meeting room late at night. He had called in that young subordinate. He wanted to make sure. Had the disposed documents truly all been disposed of? Was the data truly nowhere remaining? The subordinate answered flatly, with the same face as before. "Everything you instructed has been disposed of." But then the subordinate quietly added, "However, there may be things that automatically remain on the backup server. Those we don't have the authority to delete." For an instant, Macbeth lost his words. What he had thought he erased had not been erased. That night when he cut paper in the dead of night and rang the shredder's sound across the floor, what had that been? Erase the paper and the data remains. Erase the data and the backup remains. He had not been trying to erase the crime, but merely multiplying the places the crime resided. The subordinate was watching his face. In those eyes there was neither fear nor guilt. What there was observation. This young man knew what he had been made to do, and that the fact was, for him, a weapon. Macbeth grasped it. He had not drawn the subordinate in. The subordinate had chosen from the start to be drawn in and was now quietly counting the price of it. When he left the meeting room, the floor was dark. Macbeth looked at the place that had been Banquo's desk. No one there. The man who had transferred half a year ago was no longer there, and yet to him it looked as though someone sat in that chair, a figure that did not move, its back turned. Turn around and surely there would be a face. He did not turn around, because he knew that to turn around would be to crumble. The one who has left comes back. The past you thought you had killed does not vanish. The mouth you thought you had silenced opens. The records you thought you had disposed of remain. Macbeth had thought the place he climbed to was the edge of a cliff, but the truth was simpler still. The place he stood had from the start been a place where there was nothing. The chair he thought he had won was just a chair, and the prophecy was not a prophecy but merely desire. The next morning, he did not come in to work. He did not answer the phone either. His wife was the same. The two of them were in the same house, speaking nothing to one another, standing side by side as a wife who went on washing her hands and a husband who could not sleep. No one came to judge them. Banquo may have come to headquarters, confirmed what he wanted to confirm, and not accused after all. That remained unknown to the very end. Punishment did not come from outside. Precisely because it did not come, the two of them were not saved. To be judged would end it. But if no one judges, there is nothing left but to go on judging yourself. Macbeth gained the division head's chair and, sitting in that chair, quietly lost himself. The prophecy came true. In the form, that is, of making no one happy. Chapter 7, The Story After. A company goes on running even when a person is gone. 2 weeks after Macbeth stopped coming in, his leave of absence was formally announced. The reason was given as ill health. No one inquired further than that. Not inquiring was the etiquette of the working adult, and more than that, everyone was busy with their own work. Even with one division head missing, the meetings were held, the cases moved forward, the figures were closed. A month later, a different person sat in his seat. The handover went smoothly. The documents Macbeth had organized, disposed of, and left behind were, to his successor, nothing but a neatly tidied folder. What had happened in that year's selection, who had known it and who had kept silent, none of that was written anywhere in the handover documents. What is not written becomes what never existed. That was the shape of an organization's memory. Banquo remained at the subsidiary thereafter. In the end, no one knows what it was he had come to headquarters to confirm. There was no accusation. The company was not shaken. He simply went on working flatly at his transfer posting, and his name never came up again in headquarters personnel. Whether he had noticed the truth of that selection back then remained unknown to the very end. Only the not knowing remained. The young subordinate was promoted steadily. He told no one of that night's meeting room, because there was no need to tell. He knew that holding it without telling would serve him far longer. Within a few years, he had come close to the very division head's chair Macbeth had once sat in, and he too began to give the young people under him instructions for which he explained no reason. That not asking the reason is a skill, that young one too came to learn. When someone vacates a chair, someone else sits in it. The one who sits there does not recall who sat there before. What Macbeth feared, the sleepless nights, the sound of the shredder, the hands his wife went on washing, none of it remains on the chair. The chair is just a chair, and only the one who sits in it changes. The prophecy came true. But for the prophecy coming true, nothing changed. Macbeth became division head and then vanished. What he gained lasted half a year. What he lost was beyond counting, and there was no one to calculate the difference. The company had not needed him. There had simply happened to be an empty seat there. The place he thought he had climbed up to was, from the organization's point of view, nothing but the filling of a vacancy. One person's ambition is, to an organization, no more than a single piece of paperwork's worth of an event. You could call that cruel, or you could call it salvation. Either way, the company will move tomorrow too. Someone quits, someone enters, someone hides something, someone pretends not to know it, and so the figures are closed again today. And so Macbeth's story ended. Not as a tragedy, but as a single matter of personnel transfer.